Good afternoon to everybody. I think I am the odd man out here, and the subject also looks odd when I looked at the conclave schedule. But then, Advantage India has got several dimensions. I think during the course of the day, you all have discussed a few of them, but there is many, many more of them when you're looking at Advantage India concept as it is. But there is an overarching issue, one thing which is common, without which we will not be able to take any advantage of Advantage India. That is governance. Now, I don't know what is your concept of governance. My objective is to, in the next 15-20 minutes, to let you know what actually should be the kind of governance that we should have to make this advantage work for the people of India. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard of the famous quotation, that government is best which governs least. How many have heard of that? That government is best which governs least, only one or two of them. This is originally by David Thoreau, but was adopted by President Jefferson in USA, which clearly indicates one thing. Government is not governance. Government is only a part of governance. It's a major part or a minor part. That's a question of interpretation and argument. But government is not governance. But unfortunately, in India, somehow or other, both are mixed up. Both are mixed up. When the present Prime Minister did his campaign in the year 2014, governance was a single word which has been echoing all over the country. Governance, 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 governance. And after the government started, after the governance came to power in 2014, governance has been reduced to government. That is where we are now caught in a kind of web in this country. So I will have to explain to you precisely, first of all, let us understand what is governance. Why I am saying that governance is mixed up with government. Once it is done, you will be losing most of the advantages that India has. If you want to define governance, very simple. The term governance refers to the decision-making and implementation process in the administration of a country, state or organization. It's common to not only government. Governance does not mean only the government. It could be in a private sector company, in an industry, in an NGO, wherever. But it's only a process, decision-making and implementation process. At the country state level governance is the exercise of political, economic and administrative authority in the management of multifarious affairs at the state and that is the government level. So governance comprises the complex mechanisms, processes and institutions through which citizens and groups articulate their interests, mediate their differences and exercises their legal rights and obligations. Good governance is participatory, transparent and accountable. It is effective in making the best use of resources and personnel and is equitable. Basically, it promotes justice and the rule of law. That is briefly the definition of governance. But now, coming to the context of India. India is a democracy. Let's understand it very clearly. Go back to the origin immediately after independence, the constitution was framed. The founding fathers had an option to opt for an autocratic government or any other system of government, but they, with full conscience, adopted democracy. So, we are a democracy. Governance, therefore, should be democratic governance. And what is the democratic governance? That will be the subject of my talk today. Now, the governance discourse, when you're talking about governance, there are two contrasting notions. Whether governance should be state-centric or society-centric. That is the discourse. Should everything be driven by the state or should everything be driven by the society? Or you get the inspiration from the society and center only becomes a management kind of situation. So, what is state-centric? State-centric approach is concerned with assessing the political and institutional capacity of the state to steer society towards certain goals associated with the public good and also with examining the relationship between the role of state and the interest of other powerful actors. Meaning thereby, state leads and people follow, which is not actually a democracy. In a democracy, it's the people who are the sovereigns. It's the people who elect the government. So, government must be led by the people. But what is happening is the other way around. So, let us come to what is a society-centric. By contrast, the society-centered approach is primarily concerned with the role of civil society in the governing process and its relation with the state through a variety of governance forms and institutional arrangements. There is a lot of misunderstanding deliberately created about civil society. What is civil society? Civil society is not just NGOs. Civil society, the entire country minus those who are governed by Army Act, Navy Act and Air Force Act. Except those who are in uniform. They are governed by different set of acts. I have been in the army for about 5 years before getting into the IAS. When I was in the army, I was not a civil society member because that's a totally different culture. In the civil, everyone else is civil society. Whether you are in politics, whether you are in business, or whether you are in teaching, wherever you are, or you have an NGO, you don't have an NGO, as an individual, you are all part of civil society. So it is a civil society that elects the government. So, but there is unfortunately a myth is being created. Civil society is nothing but NGOs, and NGOs are nothing but troublemakers. That is where the core lies. I will come to that a little later. So, in a democracy, as distinct from an autocracy, governance should be society-centered, if it is a true democracy. It would include the government, which is its dominant part, but transcend it by taking in the private sector and civil society. I am making a fine distinction between civil society and private sector. I will tell you why. All three are critical for sustaining human, economic and social development. What is the role of government? Governments represented by the ruling establishment in the center and the states creates a conducive political, administrative, legal and living environment, an ambience for people to work in peace. The private sector, represented by trade, commerce, industry, agriculture, promotes enterprise and generates jobs and incomes. It's a private sector which generates wealth, jobs, income. Government's role in job is very small. That is private sector. Civil society, represented by the voluntary sector, facilitates interaction. That means this is a formal civil sector. Voluntary sector means NGOs, not the entire population. Civil society, represented by the voluntary sector, facilitates interaction by mobilizing groups to participate in economic, social and political activities. It also resolves conflict. Because each has weaknesses and strengths, governance is brought about through constructive interaction among all these. While governments are basically politico-bureaucratic proprietorships, government over a period of time in India has become proprietorship. Politico-bureaucratic. Governance is a joint venture. It's not a proprietorship company. Government is over a period of time has become proprietorship. And it is increasingly becoming so. This is a huge difference. Governance is a joint venture. So there's a huge difference between a joint venture. Most of you are in industry and business, you know it better than me. Being a joint venture, governance should adhere to certain functional norms and principles, such as involvement of stakeholders in the government and society level, and stakeholders in the decision-making process, transparency and accountability at all governmental and societal levels, citizens' participation in the process of social and public welfare, economic growth and development, a balanced relationship between all bodies of government and civil society, social auditing of government programs and policies, mandatory establishment of ombudsman institutions and their fearless functioning, civil supremacy over the armed forces, and an efficient and non-discriminatory judicial system. Most important of all, there should be enough space for the civil society represented by the voluntary sector to freely express its views and opinions on the development and other agenda of the government. Now, what is happening? See, I am a blunt person to speak. Now, if anyone criticizes a certain development agenda, the very concept of development is so skewed. Development for whom? Development for what? And if someone expresses his opinion, he is called anti-national. I'll give you a small example. I can't help doing it. I have to tell you because you need to be informed. All of you must have heard of this project called Kodungulam Nuclear Power Project. Okay, all of you must have heard. Now, that is just about 30 kilometers from my ancestral town called Nagarkoil. So I know the whole lot how the whole thing started in the mid-80s, dragged on and on, USSR, Russia, then back again. Now, in the year 2002, project work started. 2004, equipment had arrived. And the construction, domes and all were more or less complete. 2005, when more or less everything was in order, they made an announcement that 2007 December, the plant will be operational. There was no agitation whatsoever at all, except some minor scuffles here and there. There was nothing. Nothing happened till 2012, 2011, when Fukushima happened. And there was great scare because a couple of years earlier there was tsunami. So right on the coast. Actually, Kodungulam power plant is right inside the sea, not even on the coast, inside the sea. Now, I don't want to be too elaborate on this. 2011, for about 9-10 months, there was some agitation. After that, they started fuel loading and going critical. Then announced that the plant has started operation. And now, this is the year of our Lord 2016, March 11th or 12th. Yeah. This hardly produced any electricity because we knew it will not produce because it was junk. The unit 1 and 2 were junk, substandard. The company that produced, the managing director is behind bars. We knew about it. We brought it to the notice of the government and told them, please don't install it here. Have proper quality checks. But then by the time they were acquired about 6,000, 7,000 acres of land. So people who have been talking about this, they said this is development. In the process, now what has happened? Neither has electricity been sort of generated, nor has there been any development. But the whole coastal belt, about 10-15 villages, their livelihood is in great danger and their life is also in great danger. So what I am trying to say is, development for some people could be destruction for some others. So when people have to openly express views, the best policy is to discuss with the stakeholders, take their views, take them with you, and then implement the project. What happens here is you are just something is thrust on you, and then if you say against it, you are condemned with you are this, you are that, you are anti-national, you are that. So what happens is the participatory process has been very seriously endangered. Now, why this is happening? Because what I told you earlier, the joint venture mechanism is there. It is built in. Most of these do exist in India's democratic fabric, but when it comes to their practical implementation, there have been major failures. This is mainly due to the autocratic, arbitrary and confrontational style of functioning of our institutions and instruments of governance, political, executive and judicial. Why this is happening? Now, during the last discourse that you had here, we are talking about the political process, youth coming into politics and various other kind of things, political parties. But what is happening is our democratic process is so severely skewed. These political parties, for your information, have no constitutional status. These political parties are not recognized by the Representation of People's Act. But they have just sprung up like mushroom and they are all over the place. They have no rules, no law, nothing. They have refused even to come under the Right to Information Act. But they want to control the whole country, they want to rule the country, they want to do anything they want to do. Now that is where the problem is. Neither do they have a social contract with the people. See, what is the origin of democracy? Individually, during the Paleolithic age, Stone Age, a single individual living in a jungle does not need a government. A small family does not need a government. Over a period of time, government came through the process of social contract. I don't know how many, I don't want to elaborate on that. But that social contract is not there now. They come out with all kind of permutations, combinations, this Kutani, that Kutani, that Kutani, that Kutani, we really do not know. And they'll come out with some kind of election manifesto, and after that, post-Kutani, pre-Kutani, and you have a government, and they say, we are the government, what we say, that goes. So this is against the fundamental concept of governance. So what needs is people like you must assert, because in theory, government of the people, by the people, for the people. But actually practice in a representative democracy, you give a contract for 5 years to a certain set of people based on certain norms. I don't want to go into that. And that contract has to be, even when you are entering a small contract for giving a to sort of outsource something, you are so careful in examining the documents 5 times, 6 times, refer to the lawyer, this lawyer, that lawyer, and then finally the contract is signed. Here you are giving power to the some MLAs or MPs for 5 years, and there is no contract between you and him. Because the origin of democracy is based on the concept of social contract. We wanted to introduce that in this election, but probably we've been overtaken. Probably next election we'll be able to do that. So, finally what I want to say is, unless we have a proper democratic governance guided by the principles of joint venture, government, private sector and NGOs. Now what happens? Private sector participation limited to a very small microscopic number of people, big industrialists, big people. Private sector is also not taken into confidence. They are not consulted in kind of laying out policies and programs for the private sector, particularly small, mini, micro sector. NGOs are being hounded. Under the circumstances, government alone says, I function. Government alone cannot give you proper democratic governance. And if it's not there, what happens is, we should not be able to consummate all that you have in Advantage India. Thank you very much.
Sir, I have one question to ask, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I happen to be in Singapore.
Singapore. Yeah. Yeah.
Worked in Singapore for the last 2 decades. One question I would like to ask.
Mike. One minute.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Anand and I am from Singapore. One question I would like to ask you, sir, is that what has gone right in the case of Singapore?
Singapore and India, you just can't compare. It's a small city-state.
No, not
No,
India.
no, I'll come
but
to
a
that.
small, like say, even if we take a small city-state within India, we are not able to compare or emulate what Singapore has achieved. What has gone right in the case of Singapore that could be implemented for us to succeed in India?
What has gone wrong, I can tell you.
And what has gone wrong in Singapore that has gone right in India? That
What
was the
has
second part of the
gone
question.
wrong in India, I can tell you. You see, democracy is from grassroots. It grows from below. Democracy cannot be imposed from above. That is monarchy. That is dictatorship. Unfortunately, when we got independence, when the constitution was written, we had a very strong grassroots panchayat raj, urban local bodies, very strong, functioning very effectively. They were controlling the natural resources in the local area, their own areas. They were sort of having law and order. They were also dispensing justice. Then we did not have an elected assembly at that time. We did not have an elected parliament. But in the constitution, Panchayat Raj did not find any place. We had only parliament and central government and state government. the decentralized Panchayat Raj government was not there. With the result, what has happened is all the power got concentrated. In India, you can't concentrate powers in a democracy. Whereas Singapore is a small city, they concentrated power. That's the difference between. That Lee Kuan, what's his name? That first. There was a lot of concentration of power, and since being a small city state, they could do that concentration of power and make it work. But here, because of the democratic fabric, concentration power goes against the principles of democracy, and always there is a conflict. So a lot of conflict takes place. Conflict leads to a lot of confrontation. Confrontation leads to lots of distortions and the other kind of things. That's why we have not been able to really pursue a proper development agenda. So otherwise, as I told you earlier, it's impossible to compare Singapore. Singapore is only a slightly bigger. I don't think even it's bigger than Chennai. I don't know.
Smaller than Chennai.
Smaller than Chennai. So what is India? Where is?
1/3 of Chennai.
Yeah.
1/3 of Chennai.
Yeah, 1/3 of Chennai. So I don't think we really can compare. But then we can compare Chennai and Singapore. Singapore has got a city government with proper authority and delegation. Chennai has zero. There's no local government, city government at all. Chennai has no city government. The mayor is not a glorified sweeper, that's all. Every power is concentrated in state, or they have to look at the government of India for money. That's the difference between, you can compare city to city, yes.
Thank you.